KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting cellist Joshua Roman, performing from his album Immunity, alongside music by J.S. Bach and more, Sunday, June 22nd at UC San Diego's Epstein Family Amphitheater. Reserve your tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.
I'm Beth Accomando, your resident cinema junkie. It's not every day that I get to interview an Oscar winner.
The winner is George Chakiris in West Side Story.
I don't think I'll try and talk too much. I just want to say thank you very, very much. Thank you.
But I had a chance to speak with George Chakiris by phone on Wednesday because he's just been cast in the Old Globe's production of In Your Arms that opens September 16th. And he's coming to San Diego on Monday to join me for a Q&A before the screening of West Side Story outdoors at the Globe's festival stage. How perfect is that? The film, which shot many of its dance sequences on the streets of New York City, is well suited to being screened outdoors under the stars. I'll have a follow-up podcast with Chakiris next week when we'll discuss In Your Arms and his career. But for right now, it's all about West Side Story and his role as Bernardo, the leader of the Sharks. And I should mention that the interview starts in what appears to be a nice quiet room. But about halfway through, I suddenly started hearing hammering and sawing. Apparently, the interview was set up at a house where construction was taking place. But like I said, you don't get to talk to an Oscar winner every day. So you have to roll with the punches, and the saws and the hammers. We begin by talking about the prologue to West Side Story, where the cast takes to the streets of New York for a phenomenal dance sequence.
The prologue is but that was the first thing we shot, but we were on location in New York, and so we were outside on the streets. It was great, but the first thing that always comes to mind to me is Jerry Robbins. Jerry is the first thing I ever remember whenever talk about West Side Story at all, because it was his baby. He made it all happen in the theater to begin with, of course, with the collaboration of fantastic people like Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim, and in the movie with the fantastic collaboration of Robert Wise. But for me, working with Jerry, he was just the heart and soul of the way everything felt when we were working. We laughed, we played, we had a lot of fun, and the beautiful thing that Jerry and Bob Wise allowed was for us to play and have that fun, even ruin takes and things, because everybody was so deeply engrossed in the spirit of the whole thing. And that, again, to me, comes back to Jerry Robbins, because, again, it's his passion, the depth of this piece, for me, is Jerry, and, of course, the score by Leonard Bernstein. The first thing that comes to my mind is the experience of working with Jerome Robbins.
And whose idea was it to shoot the dances on the actual streets of New York?
I think that was probably a collaboration between Bob and Jerry. I don't know the specifics of anything, but, and we hear things. And the opening of that sequence in the theater is such a wonderful opening. And I had heard, I don't know if this is true, that Jerry on film wanted to use that opening sequence and do it on a set in the theater. And I think it was Bob, and then finally Jerry too, who came on board with the idea of doing it on actual locations, and they did a lot of scouting to find the different locations. But I think because it was such a strong collaboration between these two wonderful, wonderful men, whatever the ideas they started with, the things that they ended with, like shooting it on the streets of New York, was finally a collaboration between those two men. I think it was, and I think probably for doing it on location in New York was maybe 45% Jerry and 55% Robert Wise, but it was pretty close.
So as someone who worked on the stage and danced on the stage, what was it like to be able to dance on this bigger stage of the New York streets?
We had two different locations. One was a housing development that was going to be torn down when we finished, so everything was vacant. And the second location was, that was 69th in Amsterdam. And the second location we had was the schoolyard. I think that was 110th and 2nd Street, and that's still there. And that location was duplicated on a set in the studio as well. It's interesting. That's a really good question. I think we may not have thought about it at the time, but shooting on the real locations did feel different probably than it would have if we were doing that on a set created in the studio. We were in the real place, and those buildings, even though they were empty, felt like they were, like they had people in them, and some of the ones on 110th Street, of course, did. So we were in a live place, I'll say. It was still alive with all the feeling, and of course the beauty of those of the New York streets, and it. I quite honestly, I never thought of that till you just now asked me. But I would say that the feeling of being on a real location in New York City for the prologue of that movie, I think what made a huge difference for all of us. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing that happened, and the way it happened.
Well, and that opening sequence still takes your breath away when you see it on the screen.
So glad to hear you say that. I think it does too. And Jerry, and before we ever started shooting, before we started rehearsing, we rehearsed in Los Angeles at Goldwyn Studios. Jerry and Bob had been to those locations in New York and decided which street, which corner, which building. I mean, they picked. Everything was decided upon, and in terms of location, depending on what sequence of the prologue they wanted to shoot in that spot. So that when we were in and rehearsing in Los Angeles, the floor was taped like you do for rehearsing for a play. That section of tape was part of a street. The other section was part of another street. The other section was an alley, and so on. So we rehearsed in the spaces that they had, in the things that they had done in their pre-production, finding the locations. And so we knew exactly what portion of the prologue would be shot in a particular place and whatever section it was too. But again, they did some serious and wonderful location shooting and deciding where different parts of the prologue would be filmed on those New York streets. And that the opening of it, those helicopter shots, my understanding is that was Bob's idea, but you never really know. It's just we hear stuff like that, but I wouldn't be surprised. And I'm glad. Yeah, it's always nice to hear people appreciate that prologue, because so much thought and preparation on Jerry's and Bob Wise's part went into that. I mean, there's a lot of creative insight and discussion and so on that goes into everything. Should we do it this way? Should we do it that way? And we see the finished piece, and it's so great when people respond to it the way they do. I think it is a great opening. They did such a beautiful job.
Hey, Chicky. Hey, watch it, Jet Boy. Hey, Jet Boy.
And when you were shooting, did you get to shoot long sections of the dance without interruption, or was it broken up a lot when you were shooting?
Well, it was broken up, but there were some long sections as well. There was nothing that was short. I'll put it that way. Yeah, they were long sections, come to think of it. They were long sections, which is much better than doing things in shorter pieces. The continuity of it and the way it feels from beginning to end, you're carried through by the length of something instead of having to do it in short pieces, which was a different way of working. But actually, now that you've asked me that question, I really think about it. Almost everything, I would say, was a long shot. I mean, it wasn't. Nothing was a short piece. I'll tell you one thing that was a short piece, there's one scene where the jets are on the street, and on a scaffolding above them, the sharks have that yellow paint that they throw on them. That was an isolated spot just to be able to throw that paint on them.
Jess, come on! Hey, Jess! Hello!
So that was a quote-unquote shorter piece. And those poor guys, they had to do it more than once. They'd have to go clean off all that yellow paint and start over again. But by and large, they were longer shots altogether, as I recall.
And what do you think has contributed to the longevity of the film? It still is so popular.
You know, prejudice and so many things. The film touches so many chords in people that all of the things that film was about are very relevant today. I mean, except things are escalated today. But yeah, the prejudice. People, Puerto Ricans coming to in the West Side Story, coming to New York for a better life, and you know, it's not better. There are obstacles to overcome. There's prejudice against them.
Lots of new housing with more space.
Lots of doors slamming in our face.
I'll get a terrace apartment.
Better get rid of your accent.
Life can be bright in America.
If you can fight in America.
Life is all right in America.
If you're all white in America.
There's hatred, there's fighting, and then there's love between the two main characters, and their love is made so difficult by the feelings of the opposite sides of, by one side against the other. So, and I think Arthur Lawrence's original script, and there are so many wonderful lines that I remember that have to do with these things about what these young people are having to go through, whether they're the gang members who are determined to do what they want to do, or whether it's Tony and Maria trying to who are in love with each other. And the thing that I love about West Side Story, they're not just two kids who have a crush on each other. Their love somehow goes deeper, even though they're younger people. But there's a line in that I think it's Natalie that says, when they're in her bedroom, she says, "It's not us, it's everything around us." And I think just that line, it's a short line, but it says so much, because we could say that today, couldn't we? It's not us, it's everything around us, and so on in the world and the way things happen politically and so on. But again, the key word that comes to mind, if I try to pick on just one word, is prejudice is alive and well, and I think that's one of the reasons why we can relate to West Side Story, because that's very strongly part of what happens in the film and the theme of the film, and everybody can relate to that today. It's always here. It's always here. Anyway, and I think there are many other reasons why. When the team of extraordinary men who thought and created West Side Story to begin with the addition of Bob Wise for the film. I mean, these are all the gentlemen, respectively, who are just so amazing in their individual contribution and what their talents do. And this collaboration was between five extraordinary. In the theater was Arthur Lawrence, Stephen Sondheim, Leonard Bernstein, and Jerry Robbins. That's amazing. That's an extraordinary combination of talents. Jerry's choreography, for example. One of the beautiful things about Jerry's choreography is, I'll say in the usual musical that we kind of get used to, we'll have a scene, and then the scene will stop while whoever is in the scene does a number, and when the number's over, the scene picks up where it left off. In West Side Story, that is not the case at all. Every song, every dance sequence, everything is part of is the thought and the scene keeps moving forward with every number. Nothing stops just for the sake of a number.
Once an immigrant, always an immigrant.
Hey, look, instead of a shampoo, she's been brainwashed.
Stop it!
She was given a Puerto Rico, and now she's queer for Uncle Sam.
Oh, no. That's not true.
Puerto Rico, my heart's devotion. Let it sink back in the ocean.
All the musical sequences are rich with feeling and character and in what's actually going on in the story. So we feel it. And by the way, I think that's another thing. So I think West Side Story, it's impossible to see that movie and not feel something. So usually when it's over, it's a pretty quiet response at the end while people just gather themselves, I guess. But I just think it's eternal in that way because it deals with things that are always with us, whether it's I'll go back to just one example, and that's prejudice, which it's a shame we'll never be without it, but I think we never will be. So
about 400 years to when Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet.
Exactly. Yeah. Romeo and Juliet. Yes, that's what it was. And the tragedy of love that is kind of doomed, if you like. I'd say that because of the circumstances that go around these young people, and it doesn't have to be kids either. It is here, two very young people, but it can be anybody. It can be anybody of any age, and there are so many things restrictions that are placed on all of us depending on our backgrounds, what our religion says, what society says, and so many things do make it difficult. But prejudice, I think, is one of the worst offenders,
And to go back to Jerome Robbins' choreography, talk a little bit about how athletic it really was and very modern in a certain way.
Yes, it's. Thank you for using the word athletic because it was. It was. But it only. Jerry never did. I don't think he did. It's just my opinion. He never did anything just for the sake of doing it. My point is he wouldn't be athletic for the sake of being athletic. He would only use that if it was appropriate for what was going on in the piece. If it served the purpose of the story, if it served the way the characters felt, and so on. But the one that I remember in the theater when I did it, and I was playing Riff, the knife fight was very athletic, and well, it was in the movie too. But the prologue gets quite athletic. Gosh, even Arthur Krupke gets athletic, There is athleticism there, but never for the sake of it, but just for how it can enhance the story and what's going on between the characters.
And are you looking forward to coming out to San Diego to introduce the film, to talk about the film with an audience?
You know what? There are people here working in the house.
I've been noticing that.
They're replacing all the windows. And they're making
a lot
of noise. I'm sorry. But so ask me that again. I apologize.
Sure. I was wondering how you feel about seeing West Side Story again.
I can't think the last time. I think the last time I saw it, they had a screening at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion here downtown at the Music Center. And I was going to just stay for the first. I thought, well, maybe I'll watch the American number and then I'll leave. But I stayed just because I got wrapped up by what it's all about. And every time I see it, I get a chance to, I notice different things. But I'll tell you what, in the times I've sat through it, it hasn't been that many times, but it's so easy to get stuck and not be able to leave unless you have to for something, because I'm so touched by Natalie and her beautiful performance as Maria. I've seen so many Marias, and no one can touch her, in my opinion. Rita Moreno, who is just fantastic as Anita. All the kids, everyone in it. I think the last time I saw it, for some reason I kept my eye on Elliot Feld, who played Baby John. He's just so wonderful, and Tucker Smith, who played Ice, also just the performance by all this young group of people are just so beautiful, and I think that comes back to Jerry and his direction and his perfectionism and his wanting people. Jerry wasn't the sort of person who said, do this, do that. He liked it when people contributed themselves and were part of it. Part of the creative process. Sounds like a corny thing to say, but in my estimation, I think that's who he was and what he did. The first person probably to suffer from his perfectionism was him, because he kept raising the bar on himself, and by extension, although it was never spoken, you just felt it. You knew just when you walked into rehearsal, or when he walked into rehearsal, there was electricity in the air. There was just something else going on that just made everybody come up those extra notches or something. But I attribute that to Jerry, his talent, and of course his presence. Just his presence made everybody. You wanted to please this man. You really wanted to please him because he was right, and the places he was going in terms of the way things felt. And again, I think that's another reason that West Side Story, aside from what we've already spoken about, is I think I can see the way people were feeling as they were working and involved in the scene, from all of them, everybody, the entire cast. Your first question, my first thought was Jerry, and it kind of remains Jerry sort of throughout, because I think it was his presence, his creativity, and he had a reputation for being hard on people, of course. I'd always heard that was never my experience. His perfectionism was a strong part of who he was, and by extension, that's the way he worked, and that's the way he expected other people to work, although, again, it was never spoken. You just felt it.
Well, I want to thank you very much for your time and for speaking with me about West Side Story.
I'm so sorry. I had to close the door because they're making so much noise. Say that again.
I just wanted to thank you for speaking with me about West Side Story.
Oh, God, my pleasure. I hope I don't rattle on too long. I do. My answers are way too long, but I always do that. So.
But it's interesting. We like to hear about these films.
Okay, good.
And I'll be the one moderating the discussion on Monday here at the Globe, so I'll be meeting you then.
That should be fun. It's always a pleasure to talk about something, especially something like this that you got to be part of. We're all so lucky to have been part of it, and it remains the thing that keeps us all together. And by that I mean there is a West Side Story family. We've all stuck together like flies. We've all known each other ever since, like it was yesterday. And that was true for Bob Wise, too, by the way. He remained friendly with everybody in the cast. And one of the things Bob said, with all the wonderful movies he made, this was the only movie where he had that experience of remaining for a long time with his cast. I think there's something about the piece that just does that, whether you're doing it in the theater or wherever. I think there's something about West Side Story that pulls people together in this really close-knit way.
I'm Beth Accomando, and this is the Cinema Junkie Podcast. You've been listening to my interview with actor and dancer George Chakiris. He'll be joining me on Monday, August 24th at 8 p.m. at the Old Globe Theater on the outdoor Lowell Davies Festival stage for a Q&A before the screening of West Side Story. If you enjoyed the interview, please go to iTunes and give it a rating. You can also reach me on Twitter at Cinebeth or on the Cinema Junkie Facebook page. Thanks for listening, and if you're addicted to film like I am, subscribe to my podcast and mainline film with me 24/7.
KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting cellist Joshua Roman, performing from his album Immunity, alongside music by J.S. Bach and more, Sunday, June 22nd at UC San Diego's Epstein Family Amphitheater. Reserve your tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.